Hello everyone. Today I would like to go over how to understand the basic anatomy of the skull. I am going to start with human and then I will show you how that translates over to a dragon. The funny thing is about basic anatomy is most animals have pretty much the same structures, just how you warp the proportions that change if it looks human or if it looks something completely different. So we're going to start with the human first and just go through the very basic building blocks for an artist. You can get more technical with this. Studying skulls is a really interesting artistic thing to do. But for the purposes of this, I'm going to go through a really simple, just in case anyone's a beginner. So I'm going to start with a circle. I know, your friend and mine, Mr. Circle. And then I add kind of a cone shape to be the jaw area. I do add my midline just to help me keep things symmetrical, otherwise I end up with one eye that's too far away or the nose ends up crooked and I didn't want it that way. So there you go. Alright, so basic parts of the skull. The top part, the cranium, is where you will have your eye sockets, obviously, and those are normally the fun part here. Okay, we have our eye sockets. Eye sockets are actually bigger than your eyeball. Otherwise, well, you wouldn't be able to turn your eyes very well. The nasal cavity is right in there. The nose is actually cartilage, so you don't have any bones in that area, but it is there. Now, the interesting thing is the top of your skull is a separate piece than the bottom. So this bone is the maxilla. If I were to get a little carried away, there's your teeth, sort of thing. This part right here is where you have cheekbones. That's important for defining the overall shape of the face. Some people have really pronounced ones. Some people don't. You know, I made his skull too tall here. So I'm just going to go in and do that, and through the power of erasing, we're just going to trim him down to proportion here. Excellent. Okay, so there's the top of the skull. The bottom of the skull is actually called the mandible. I made my cone too long for what I was doing, but that's okay. It was just there to hold. There's where your teeth go, and the mandible actually hinges right in front of where your ear is. So if you ever have jaw pain and you wonder why you feel like you've got an ear infection, but you don't, that's probably why. They're all connected right there. A whole bunch of nerves, a whole bunch of little, wonderfully large medical terms all squished together. So there's the basic parts. The forehead right here, there is a rise area where the eyebrows are. It does come out to there and go back in, depending on the person's age, gender, ethnic background. Those are all different shapes. Now, if we go over to a dragon, for example, I'm going to start with the same process. I'm going to have, Mr. Circle, Mr. Midline, and then however far down I want my beak to go. You'll notice already there's some similarities. Now, depending on how you style your dragon, if their eyes are more forward facing, you're going to see more of a round orbital socket. If their eyes go off to the side a little bit, it's going to look a little bit like they're squinting at you, but really it's because they're, if you were to look at the profile, they'd be more round. If you look at them from the front, they end up like this. Animals that are usually prey animals like deer, horses, stuff like that, their eyes are totally on the side of their head, whereas predator animals, they're totally on the front. If you don't believe me, look at a wolf, a big cat, a lion of any sort. So you have your choices. They're humans. You will notice we have our eyes on the front. But there you go. So that's all just personal preference on how you want to style your particular beast, but it is there. Now, the nasal bone. Since my dragon is going to have some kind of a bony ridge right here, I'm just going to rough that in, but I am going to leave some kind of a gap for where the nostril area would be. There's still going to be some kind of cheekbone, and there's still going to be teeth. Very good. Now, since I would normally put horns on a dragon because, well, I like horns on my dragons, I think they look fancy, I'm going to leave a little growth area where they would be. Since humans don't have that, that part I get to kind of fake a little bit. There'll still be some kind of a brow bone, and there's still, again, some kind of cheekbone. and the top. Then again, there'll be that lower jaw, that mandible. It's going to be in there, whatever shape I want it to be. There we go. And there you have the front view. Now let's talk about the side view, because if there's a front, there's also a side. Occurs to me my friend here kind of has a short chin. There we go. Look at that. Better than any plastic surgeon in speed anyways. Alright, from the side, same thing. Mr. Circle. This time I'm just going to make a mark for where I want to put the eyes, and then I roughen this shape. Now, as I said before with the example over here, since we're now looking from the side, it's not going to be totally round. It's going to be more of a V with a curved part shape, or a little rounded if you want, and that's what the eye socket looks like. Interestingly, the eyeball also does the same thing. But there you go. The nose bone comes out. It's not as long as the nose would be. Remember, all this area, if it had a nose, was cartilage. I'm going to come down here. There's his teeth. There's the other teeth. The cheekbone is here. Now to draw this jawbone, it kind of comes up like this, and this area is actually a gap. Now the ear would normally be right there, which if you take the skull and you were to divide it with the line going through the middle of the eye and through the middle of the head, the ear usually falls right on that pivot. Clean up the back of the head here. Human beings do not have totally round skulls. They're kind of egg-shaped. If you don't believe me, go look at a picture of King Tut's skull. He had a really, really eggy-shaped skull. Now the neck does not join here. No, no. The bones actually join here at the back of your head. Right there. That way there's room for your windpipe and major blood vessels, and your spine can help protect all of that from the back. So that is where it joins. That is where, if you turn your head, it pivots from here, not down here, up here, so that way you can spin your head around. That's really just the major part of the bones. Now, if you're trying to draw the difference between, say, a masculine head or a feminine head, all you do to make the difference is with a male head, you just make the bones more pronounced in the jaw, the forehead, and the back of the head. They actually have a little bump right here, and the reason is, especially guys who are super muscular, the muscle mass that they develop in their neck, connecting their neck to their shoulders, actually pulls on that bone, and it makes it protrude a little bit on the back of the head. So you can actually tell, if you find a skull, as long as you have certain parts of it, you can tell the age, you can tell the gender, you can tell the ethnicity, which makes it fun for scientists when they find something they're trying to figure out who or what the person was. Alright, so to draw a dragon skull now, I'm going to start again with Mr. Circle. I'm going to make a point for where I want my beak. There's going to be the brow area, that's this bone, that's this area. Beak's going to come down. Then there's going to be that portion of the skull right there, and then I would have the jawbone part. That would come something like that. That's going to be a gap. Teeth, just for clarity's sake. And again, that nasal opening. And again, that more predatory style eye socket, where it's going to be in here. Then I have that little area where the horn would grow out if it was there. Now this brings up again, well, where do I attach the neck? Well, if you look at the human and you look at the dragon, it's a little stretched out, but the area is still there. Clean this line up a bit. I'm not totally up. There we go. There's a jawbone. I would have the neck not really attached here. The bones are going to start coming off like this. Excuse me, like that. So it's going to attach somewhere in this region on the skull, which if you took this human and squished it down, you would end up with a similar look. So it's going to attach, and then there'll be the bony parts that come up, and then the muscle and the skin would go over it. And the whole point of the spine is to protect that spinal column, that bundle of nerves. If you have that damaged, well, that's not going to work. So that's the basics of how to draw a skull for a fantasy creature or a human. And if you're ever not sure what you should or should not include on a creature, if you want to make it have just a little bit of more of a hint of believability, study real skulls. There are tons of online resources, especially if you look for zoology collections from different universities. They frequently have theirs available online. And it's an invaluable resource. So if you're looking at a creature and you're like, I'd like to make a dragon or a fantasy creature that looks something like that, go look up a real example that's as close as you can get. Frequently, I have sort of a horse look to mine, but that's not all. Let's see, horse, some people do a dog shape, some people do more of a cat. Then, of course, there's an abundance of real-life lizards like Komodo dragons, monitor lizards, crocodiles, alligators, that whole family, where you can get all sorts of ideas of how to make the skull and the bones work together. But again, there's no set rules for fantasy, and if you're doing a human, you just want to follow some of the basic guidelines, even if you're drawing a stylized character, so that way your work goes from looking sort of flat to a little bit more realistic, a little bit more believable. You want to be able to get that anatomy in there, and that'll help especially if you get good at this. Then you want to draw a wild and crazy pose, like something from Spider-Man, for example. Then you know the anatomy, then you just go in and start twisting it and turning it around until you get the angle or proportion you want. And the same is true of a fantasy design. Find the anatomy, follow it out, see what you can get. All right, have a good day.